Okay, so I guess I'm about ready to start a Mighty Fortress. For money, I'm just going to use poker chips. I printed out these. This is supposed to be 3 pages. I don't know how much it's going to help. I think it's missing a couple of locations. But basically, I guess the political and religious victory conditions, but there's no religious on any of them, so I don't know what that's quite meant to handle. Revenue is the revenue of all the territories by city or by location. Area, really, for the most part, which I don't know how. No, these are actually the cities that are there. Garrison, I don't even know what that's meant to be. There's a few that have garrisons here. Marked down. That may be a rule that didn't make it over into the Decision Games version. I certainly don't remember there being garrisons in my discussion. But anyway, if that's the case, if they've cut out rules as well, that's a little bit more problematic. And initial and current religion, initial and current control are both listed there. Okay. I'm probably going to use markers for control and maybe religion as well, rather than try to deal with this on paper. But we haven't fully decided yet, and it's really these aspects are the things that have kept me from playing it for the first time and now. Is that the game doesn't come with the components that you actually need to play it, and it never did. It was always kind of a write this all down on paper. Yeah, okay. But we'll get started and see where we're having problems, and if they're, we'll figure our way out. I've got games that have counters, I've got blank counters, I got all kind of stuff I can use. All right, so let's look for the sequence of play. There it is. Now at the beginning of the game, nobody's at war, so all this is going to allow you to do is to shift around, and I'm going to use the supposedly historical victory conditions. As far as I'm concerned, everywhere where there are victory conditions, that are optional, well, the variable are essentially as historically arguable, not the losses. Those are fitted in. Those apply to any. But they're essentially, as believable a set of victory conditions as the as the historical one is. I don't see any real reason to favor one over the other. It does allow for a little bit of not knowing, not being able to calculate what the other players are having. What I'm going to do as a restriction on that is nobody's going to be able to calculate other people's victory points. So they're not going to be able to make decisions based on that. That appears to be how the game is actually designed to be played. And honestly, if you can't look at the other player's player cards, well, then even if you've played it quite a few times, one set of victory conditions should work perfectly fine. It would take quite a few playings to really understand, London is worth a lot to them. You might know that, but you probably wouldn't know the entire victory point. Unfortunately, they have the campaign list here. They don't have who goes first in there, so that's listed here. Ottoman Papal States. Okay, we can go that way. Habsburgs, excellent. France, England, Lutherans. Hey! It's perfectly set up on the board already. I kind of lucked into that, but those are reasonable places to have starting things. It goes in the opposite order than I usually do, but that's okay. And let's take a look at what kind of thinking I'll make here. First of all, every unit that I want to move is going to cost me. Now, I know some people don't like the advanced game, probably for that reason. It makes the turns go too quickly, probably, and it, because you don't have the cash to do things, and it also really limits, your capability to act at any given time. I see that as actually a feature to the game. It's going to keep it more historically accurate. Warfare was expensive, and there were large lulls. Well, we'll see how well it reflects this, but I think the real problem that people are having, though, is, look, big game, and you're not going to change much because of the expenses. And the only people who are going to really be able to play without digging into their resources and maybe bankrupting themselves, initially the Lutherans, and then the papacy eventually, where they're playing for the religious control. And then the other people don't get to play as much. I think that'll work out fine solo. There's no hidden operations or anything in this. So we'll take a look at our Ottoman victory conditions, and we don't want to lose anything, okay? We really want Vienna, Prague. I mean, it's pretty obvious. We want to set up so that we're facing so that we're facing the Habsburgs. So what I'm going to need to do is I'm going to need to track what each player's income is, and I may use paper for that. It's already here. They say 17. Let's take a quick look. Constantinople. Let me make sure my game handles things. I'm not going to even worry about this. Constantinople's a 6. Athens is a 3. I'm up to 9. Bucharest, I'm up to 12. Belgrade, 14. And Buda puts me up to 17. So I've got a 17 income. It'll cost me 6 to move all my pieces. I think I want to do that. I'm not really willing to go to war quite yet. I'm not allowed to. But I do think I want to move forces forward. So I'll pay that cash. Yep, we got to dance all the way over here. I haven't quite figured things out. This table's so large, and I tend to not be near my bank. And as long as I don't enter other people's stuff, I'm okay. There's a big army here that we don't want to face. We would like to get to Venice. That might be our best option early on, but that could be dangerous. I can carry 2 dudes on a boat, right? That's what I seem to remember. Now I could pay extra. I think I'm going to use that combined thing where you pay extra and see if you can move all together. This is an expensive move to move all of these. So let's pay, what is it, $1 extra. Oh, I don't have dice here. I'll be back. Let me look at the advanced roll. It's probably $2 if I want to move the full amount. And actually, it's not paid yet. I'll try to move 2 extra spaces with this one fleet. So I make a roll. I'm combining the two rolls in a way you're not supposed to. Maybe I should just allow payment. I think I'll just do it on payment. I just think It's going to be hard enough to do things in this game as it is. 1, 2, 3, 4. And, you know, I guess that's enough for the Ottomans. I don't really want to get, I don't want to give up a city based on what happens there. So that's the Ottoman move. Now we go to the papacy. The papacy probably doesn't have a lot they want to do at this point. We'll get these in order here. So they start getting reinforcements later. We'd like to convert things we can't. We'd like to get Jesuits into places. Foreign control of our areas, Ottoman control of Prague, Venice, and Vienna, so we don't want that to happen. But we also don't want the Habsburgs to do too well if they get Marseille or Milan. That causes us problems. We're really looking at a balance of power. Obviously, we're not interested in the Lutherans, and we don't want the French to do too well in Italy. That puts us almost naturally, as historically was the case, as the English ally at this stage in the game. But there's the marriage problem. I think I don't want to move. I'm not particularly interested in capturing anything except for gaining money. So maybe grabbing some of these territories would be worthwhile. Let me look to see what that's going to cost me. I think it's going to cost me full income. And for that, well, we have to look up our full income. But if it's correct, our revenue is 9. Rome is worth 4. Ravenna, 5. Bologna, 6. Wow, we're poor. Trier, 7. Mainz, yeah. And Cologne. Yeah, we're poor. Okay. Which would mean we'd need to spend $9, which we do not have, and we're not allowed to spend it. We could get a loan, but we don't need to declare war to go into those, but we need to pay the full value. Which means, again, the papacy isn't in a position to grab lots of territory right at the beginning of the game. That's probably pretty cool, actually. So they're just going to pass their first turn, sitting on their cash, and collect money again. I'm going to look up, seeing the old rules, whether or not the garrisons apply. But otherwise, we are sitting on the Habsburg term. Look at this chart, and if I trust it, and I couldn't find anything on the garrisons, by the way. The Habsburgs have 36 income. They only have $18. They can't do anything aggressive on the first turn. I'm guessing it goes with everyone. It sure looks like it. It looks like they start with about half the money that they have for income. Which means they're not going to, everybody's just going to be setting up for the first turn. I also looked at the Habsburg victory conditions, and I find this one, London 4, with a star, somewhat disconcerting. Previous to the divorce question, the Habsburgs were an English ally, primarily, or for the most part. They certainly had no reason that they would want to go into London. The only reason to do that would be to put, I don't know. I really don't know. Maybe to depose Henry and put Mary on the throne, or force Henry to be married to Catherine. I mean, I have no idea there. but their main interest is they have a dynastic tie with England, and whatever intent they might have going into there doesn't make a lot of sense. And I think the historical victory conditions, and probably all of them, don't really take that into account very well. So some of them don't give you, in fact, most of them don't give you any England points at all. The only one is seizing London in the historical, and that only makes sense due to the divorce question. A little bit of a problem in the game as far as I'm concerned. 4 is a fairly high amount of victory points, although the Habsburgs have a lot of other things to worry about. 8 maybe makes it interesting enough that you might actually intervene under some circumstances, maybe, kind of, I don't know. All right, don't know where I'm going to move with them. Again, there's no negotiation phase before at this point. It's pretty obvious the Ottomans are heading our way. But do we care? Do we care enough to put a third of our money into that position? Lutheran interest is a little different. Everyone except the Ottomans have passed. They don't want to spend the money on moving their forces. Most of them are more or less near something they want to attack. The Ottomans made the decision, hey, we want to intervene in Italy and maybe put a threat on the Habsburgs. And we'll see, see what ends up coming of that. Venice is very appealing to us. For the Lutherans, I fixed their reinforcements. Rome just doesn't exist. I actually found scans of the backs. Somebody uploaded a zip file containing the original rolls, which allowed me to check for those garrisons, which don't appear to exist. And maybe it's an optional that showed up somewhere, I don't know. And for these, for the rest of the reinforcements, they got them correct, except they left one missionary short. Maybe it's that Jesuit there in Mecklenburg. There's a reasonable argument why, there might be a converter in Rome, but it can't be there before the Jesuits are there, and it shouldn't have much of a chance. So I don't really want to see that. Now, notice, you get no points for converting, say, Rome, right? That would definitely be a coup, and it's completely possible in the game, but it's not of any interest. All right, but what we do have to worry about is Mecklenburg. We have to convert Mecklenburg, and in order to do that, we have to find them. Because next turn, we get additional armies and missionaries if we happen to succeed. So, I don't know where it is. Because I actually don't see it. It should be near Württemberg. Oh, there it is. No. What am I thinking of? What is near Mecklenburg? Or what is near Württemberg that reminds me of Mecklenburg? I don't know, maybe. Okay, so we definitely want to get someone over into Mecklenburg. Beyond that, it doesn't really matter, Württemberg is the next year. That's probably worth doing. But we don't want to, we don't really need to go out of our way. The problem, of course, is we have to mark down what we've taken and what we haven't. Fortunately, I started trying to track conversions here. I spread the Lutherans all over the place. Some places they don't even particularly care to convert. And I started marking them on here, but there's too many missing. Like Ansbach isn't on there, And you could say, well, how much does that matter? It doesn't have a city, whatever. Yeah, well, Ansbach's worth 3 victory points. It had better be tracked somewhere. I don't know how I'm going to mark these suckers. I may try to recreate this kind of chart, at least where it's complicated in Germany. Okay, so I generated my own list, and I'm just worrying about religion. I may worry about control on these as well, and I've got plenty of room to put that in place. Control for other things, I'm going to have to handle probably with little control markers. I'll pull them out of maybe EU, which, you know, at least has the right ones for the players, although Spain, the Habsburg, well, there's a Habsburg one, yeah. Yep. And yeah, I'm using these little blue markers for stuff outside of Germany, outside of the difficult areas. Now you might wonder to yourself, wait a minute, aren't areas converted? What's up with these little guys in Poland? Well, for whatever reason, Poland seems to be converted individually. So, you know, like Warsaw is worth a point, Riga is worth a point, etc. So I'll worry about that. I didn't move into Bohemia, for example. Hey, I don't want to be in a place where the Habsburgs can march in and do something. I'm not really protecting these guys, though, which means somebody could go cause problems for the ones that aren't in cities. For example, these guys in Bavaria, they're kind of at risk. Somebody has to invade Bavaria to do it, and that's going to move us to the taxation phase, which is pretty easy. We just look up the amount of money. Now, it's going to get harder, but initially, assuming that chart's correct, we just look up the amount of money. I'm not convinced that that chart is correct, though, so I may have to make up my own little income charts, but I won't be convinced that they're correct either, so I don't know. Right now, I need a break. It's just, you know, there's too much setup that's not included in the game, basically. Like these charts. Like, what's your actual income? You know, that should be presented to you in a chart form for each country. I don't know if there's plenty of room. There wasn't in the original, but now there's plenty of room. You could, you know, use up some of this big space they used, maybe get rid of some of these stupid pictures they put in, and actually provide something that would be helpful. But if not, you know, separate charts for each player to track what cities they own would make sense. Of course, I wouldn't trust Excalibur to do a better job on that than I would do. In fact, I'd trust them to do a much worse job, or than random, you know, guy online would have done. Well, I gave the player aid the ultimate test and counted the Habsburg territories up. It comes up to 36. I got 39. I'm pretty sure I didn't add extra money anywhere. So we're pretty sure that thing is useless, and I'll just keep counting the others. Everything up to the Habsburgs had worked fine. I assume, you know, basically anything that's difficult to do is iffy on their side. The hardest of these all is the Lutherans. The income for the papacy was incorrect. Sort of. There's 3 points for these here, but there is a rule, and Claire put it in here, but there is a rule if you're playing with the advanced rules, which of course is the only time you'd be playing with money. The papacy has some special rules affecting them. First of all, they never have to pay the war cost, the full cost of their units, but they can pay for replacement movement, use of combat units, but never for any belligerent action. However, to make up for that, they're not allowed more than $6. Now, let us look at the papal player and see if they wanted to do something based on that. I'll change it if they do. So, conversions are important to us. I see our military units as being important. Oh, wait. Italian states are worth 3 points each. Huh. Now, I don't know if that counts as the Kingdom of Naples and Sicily and Sardinia as well, or if it only counts the North Italian states. But certainly, there's a desire to eventually conquer those things. They're not going to give us any income right now, but it might make sense to take them. So I'm going to pay a third of my income and move into some of those locations. Now this is kind of rewinding back to the campaign phase, but now I'm allowed to move all my units. And we'll grab Venice, Genoa, Florence, and Siena. And that gets us, 4 of these states that are very easy to take. Now, of course, we've left the Papal States empty, which might be a problem. Like it might be a huge problem if we look like we're in the lead, but they're worth 3 points each, so I think grabbing them at this point is worth a couple of bucks before somebody else grabs them. Plus, we've put up a bit of a defense for Venice, which is kind of nice given that the Ottomans had moved in that direction. All right. So I paid out the money. Some of these were wrong. France, he didn't count Bray into play. England, I think he got right. Lutherans, I think he got right, but there's something weird. It doesn't correspond with, and I can't find an answer to this. Oh, I'm mistaken. Okay. So this is my fault. Wittenberg shouldn't be handled separately from Saxony. It's a part of Saxony. It looked like it was separate. These cities, probably in the original it wasn't a problem, but they kind of jump out too much and look too separate. And I mean, it's pretty clear that the border doesn't go there, but I'm assuming with the gray towns and everything, there would be less distraction. I'm pooped counting up, all the things. It'll, I assume, get easier because I'm tracking my income now. And as I come to the how to make this game playable in terms of, providing the right aids and components that I need for it, I think I'll get to being able to play it a little bit, at a reasonable pace, because basically nothing's happening yet. Right now we're slipping into the diplomacy phase, and at this point, the first diplomacy phase is supposed to take a little longer. See what's going to happen, but I have the feeling France and the Ottomans are at least going to express a desire to work together to hitting the Habsburgs. The Habsburgs are very strong, and no, they're not ahead in the victory conditions. They don't have to just hold what they have. As far as I know, they have to do things. But by ganging up on them, we'll be in a position where we're weakening them. And a lot of goals for the Ottoman, well, almost all the Ottoman goals are Habsburg territory. The French have interesting goals against the Habsburgs and have sort of a natural inclination to move in that direction. Obviously, the Lutherans are at least somewhat interested in trying to defang the Habsburg ability to cope with them, which leaves us to a couple of interesting things. England will probably be more towards their natural pro-Habsburg alliance. The papacy can't do shit. I mean, they expanded as much as they can, basically. Of course, I can put little flags out or whatever and move my units further. I'll grab more of North Italy. But in general, we're in kind of a pro-Habsburg situation, and we may hunt down Lutheran like these guys in Bavaria if we can, just to give a little help to trying to prevent too much conversion taking place. All right. Here's the problem. You can't declare war. You can if you save up for it. But for example, let's take a look at the Ottomans who spent some money mainly to move these fleets so that they would be in range of Venice. Well, Venice is covered now. I can't go take it. There's not much I can take. I mean, I could maybe get to Turin, conceivably, I don't know. Not quite. And because no one entered territory, I mean, I guess I could pay 2/3 of my income to declare war, say on the Austrians. But I won't have enough money to conduct war operations. The problem is my declaration of war happens down here in the diplomacy phase, and there's really nothing I can do to trigger that war. Well, I mean, I can declare war, but the next turn I can't actually invade because I won't have my full income that I just got. And that's kind of the case with all of these countries. They're going to have to wait even one turn more. I think the game probably would make sense with larger pools of money at the beginning. I'm not terribly interested in the idea of the basic game, which doesn't have constraints. And, you know, you're going to see widespread attacks of an ahistorical nature going on throughout the game, like you do in a lot of games which, you know, try to lightly cover strategic situations. So in this case, is there anything going on in the diplomacy phase? And I think the answer is no. You don't want to make a diplomatic arrangement. So for example, France and the Ottomans can't make one because the papacy could then issue a bull and say, hey, that's not good. You know, the papacy wants to withhold, well, the English want to delay the decision as long as possible at this point as to whether or not they're going to have to take, you know, a 6 or 10 point hit for the question of the divorce. And really, that's kind of the situation everybody's in is, well, there's nothing we really want to do. The only thing we'd want to do is some military adventurism, and there's no reason that we have to delay for that particularly. So, I think we can pass through the diplomacy phase without anything. We go to the expenditure phase. Like I said, there's no actual maintenance costs. I think theoretically I'm supposed to keep track of how much money I spend and actually spend it at this point. I'm not sure I see a reason for that. Yeah, I'm not sure I see any reason for that. You can't deficit spend or anything like that, so if I had to spend money during the military operations, well, you know, it's not available for me to build new units or anything like that. So I'm not sure why that distinguishment is put there. But this is when you would get, when you would slate reinforcements and replacements. Given the lack of money that everybody has, I don't think we want to pay. And here's what's funny. So like if the Ottomans could get into Venice and take it, they would pay full amount at that point, and then they could declare war on the Habsburgs without any additional penalty, except that now they're at war. That's the only real reason that you're keeping the expenditures tracked for them, and I don't really need that. So nothing actually comes in. We got a game turn indication, and we have a marker here, 1533. Some Lutherans show up. In Mecklenburg, there's going to be an army and 2 missionaries. So we hunt over here, find the Mecklenburg one. We kind of look at these, Württemberg, Augsburg, those all. And, well, I might as well save this guy and grab a couple more missionaries. I have way more missionaries than I need right now, at least towards getting my victory point spaces. And invading other people's territory with missionaries doesn't make a whole hell of a lot of sense, because they can stomp them with armies. So unless I have a military cover for my missionaries, I can't really just go walking into places and taking them on. You got to be a little careful not to have your missionaries gathered in cities that you already, well, the problem is this. If you have your missionaries gathered in a city you've already got the religion for, you end up in a situation where the enemy, even if you have an army there, can still slip one of his missionaries into play. And I guess we'll start the next turn. It would be kind of neat if things could actually be done early in the game, but it looks like the advanced rules preclude that. I don't know. 1532 is probably a little early. 1533, 1534 is when sort of the excitement starts happening. But the problem here is, if you're paying, your entire income on the ability to move and conduct hostile operations, you still have to pay for each attack that you make. And it doesn't look like that's going to hang together terribly well. And like I said, the basic game, as written, just looks bland. It looks like any number of games that came out in a later period. Some things like Decision Games and another company also put out things on, the 30 Years' War, and when you start looking at stuff like Soldier King, where you have the capability, to just engage wherever you like. There's no real states of war or anything like that. And most importantly, no financial consideration on how long the wars can go on without just sort of collapsing and both countries having to get away. I like the fact that this makes an attempt to get to that, and that it makes it fairly hard. You have to gather your income up for some time, but you don't have enough starting capital to make the game interesting right away. If you look at something like Empires in Arms, which doesn't use this kind of system, but it does have armies, and it has situations where a country may not want to be involved in the military aspects of the game for significant portions of the game, but right at the beginning, you're jumping right into the action. Here, you're not. I think it's time for bed. I just, it's really hard for me to motivate into playing this. I was hoping to get this sucker done over this, for me, long weekend, but I just haven't had the impetus. Now we're in this situation where, hey, the Ottomans, they have enough money they could attack someplace, but there's nothing they really want to attack. Venice would have been a nice target. With it covered, it's no longer appealing, possible. And so it's time to save money like everybody else is doing, right? so that I'll be able to do something some turn. Well, here's where it gets kind of ridiculous. These guys have already been at sea for a year, you know? I mean, sure, they're on the coast and everything, but there's no ports there sufficient to maintain large fleets, and there's a reason why, you know, these bigger ports exist. That's where the fleets winter, you know? So there's something very unrealistic about being able to move only 6 spaces a year with any of these things. Basically, movement should be almost across the board in a year's time. And the only question is tactical movement within that. Again, this doesn't try to be any kind of real, you know, military simulation or anything, but it does represent military units, and and I mean real military units, not like Britannia, where it's maybe forces of people at some point. So Britannia certainly has its problems with the military aspect of some of the representation, especially when you get to the in the early game with the Roman invasion, and in the late game where you have the Norman and Norwegian invasions. But with what's going on here, these were obviously purely military units. And yeah, you know, a Navy can clearly sail across the Mediterranean in a lot less than a year with no real problem. I would say at the very least the naval rules aren't sufficient. The 18 hexes doesn't get you very far. And then you're left sitting at sea for years because, well, I don't want to spend anything else. I'll leave the Navy out at sea where it's not costing me. What? All right. So anyway, the Ottomans are just going to pass because no reason to spend a third of my money for no real use. And I guess that's going to probably happen for most of them. The only question is I probably will still move these papal forces and grab more papal territories. And that means I need control markers. Well, I dug out my my EU control markers. Okay, fine. Realized I don't think I can find my blank counters. I don't know where the hell they are. They may not even be up here. They may still be in Phoenix. But the problem with the EU counters is that the papacy, the only person I need them for so far, doesn't really have very many. They have like 3 counters. So they're not the person they're not a good choice for this experiment. Every other country, you know, not the Lutherans, they don't exist. Every other country in the game, though, has a fair number of counters that I can, you know, especially given that nobody seems to be able to move. Only the papacy, and it doesn't help them because they don't get any income off this stuff. Papacy expanded. Now, for the Lutherans, there's an interesting question. I could spend my $9, my full income, to attack various states in Germany. In particular, one thing I can do is I can grab, there's 3 cities that I don't get income from that I can take easily, without declaring war on the papacy. But maybe I can go for those. There's a special rule having to do with the 3 ecclesiastical electorates. So maybe there's something more there. But Augsburg, which I eventually will get for free, Nuremberg and Wittenberg is part of Saxony, so I'm already getting that. So actually there's only 2. Augsburg is worth 4. Metz isn't mine either yet. I could go take Metz. That's worth... Wow, Metz is not an existing city. Awesome. I'm about ready to give this thing up. I don't know how much value there is in it. Let's see, here's this city income chart. Maybe this one's better. I don't see it on there either. Maybe it's in the errata. Metz is 2. Same for the tables card. Okay. Great. Okay, so Metz is worth $2. Augsburg is worth 4, but I'll get it eventually. And Nuremberg is worth, I think, 1. So I could increase my income, which is kind of cool, because if I'm not doing anything, I collect that. But whenever I do something, I'm paying proportional to my income. And if I'm doing something significant, I'm paying my entire income each turn that I do something. I still think having a good high income is a valuable thing. So I'm going to do that. And it's also going to allow me to grab things like Bavaria that are border territories. And I can just basically take all that brown German stuff, with the probable exception of the ecclesiasticals, which aren't worth much anyway. We found where the garrisons got introduced. In the errata, they added an optional rule. Armies of neutrals. All bright yellow areas are neutral. Well, that doesn't help me, but it's basically the orange areas, with the exception of Poland, and Sweden is considered neutral. And for some reason it's tan here, but whatever. That's not going to affect, it affects what the Pope did, seizing all that territory. And it's a realism factor. It really is. But there's no little, like, garrisons exist almost everywhere in that case. And you don't really need to mark it down somewhere. And it's the strength of what the city will hold. So, Norway wouldn't have one. I'm looking to see what might. So, like, here they've got one for Metz. Metz wouldn't have one here, but maybe the coloring was different. Maybe they didn't brown out the map. I mean, you know, who knows? Because this is problematic enough as it is, this whole, like, colored area for the Lutherans that isn't theirs. Yeah, that may have been introduced. No home areas have them, but I'm trying to see if any of these, like if there's any cities that don't have them. There's no real reason you would do this except that you could write down the strength of the garrison as it decreases. That's the only reason to put anything there, and there's no room to do that because they put a Y there instead. But yeah, it's meant for that role. Okay. So that's that. I was looking to see if I could find something. I ran into that because I was looking to see if I could find something on the ecclesiastical provinces, which I thought I saw something in here. But again, it's across the page instead of the normal format, so I can't really read it. Here we go. There's been some trouble vis-a-vis papal occupied states of cities of Cologne, Mainz, and Trier. These are in Germany for purpose of the rules. They're considered part of the papal states. They may be attacked and entered by the Lutherans without first having been converted. Oh. You know what? I don't... maybe there's a rule here that I'm not... there may be a rule here that I'm not aware of that I read, that the Lutherans can't attack something that's not already Lutheran. I'll look for that. Indeed, it's the rule with that number, but I just spent 20 minutes flipping through the rule book in the 8. The Lutherans can't attack areas in Germany, which I guess is the brownish area, except for Sweden, without first converting them. And that means we're going to just finish up our conversions this turn, which I marked all off, and we're not going to make any attacks, and we're not going to spend any money, which means we go to taxation, collect all our money, and then we'll be in diplomacy. Okay, So in diplomacy, hey, is there anything that's going to happen? Well, the English still want to hold off. They've got one more turn that they can delay the divorce question. And they want to do that. They want the least amount of turns in the game where France and the Habsburgs are interested in attacking them, or especially interested in attacking them. And what about other people? Well, like the Ottomans are out here with their forces and all, but they don't have all that much cash built up. So I have the feeling this is going to be going on for quite a while, where everybody's just going to be building up enough cash to conduct some campaigns eventually. And if you end up on the losing end, that's cool, because your revenue goes down and you end up not having to spend. You have to spend what you're getting in, but you won't be dipping into your reserves quite as deeply, or something like that. I don't know. It really doesn't make a difference. But yeah, so we've done 2 turns, and almost nothing has happened at all. Nothing of consequence. The Ottomans moved some of their pieces around. The papacy grabbed some cities which are of no worth to them. If I had been playing with the optional rules, we wouldn't have even gone for those, because it's too hard to take them. The papacy doesn't have, they have 3 armies. Florence has 6. Yeah, I'm not going to be able to take that out. At least that's how I read this. It's almost impossible to take things. Like, again, it's like, and you figure something like this that's been tossed in is probably not well play tested, but I get the feeling a lot of the game hasn't really never got a play test in, really. And maybe the basic game is a little easier to justify. So let's see. Neutral armies. For each city in a neutral, it has a garrison equivalent to its army capacity of the city. So, yeah, Venice has 4. Okay, great. 4 isn't too bad. Florence is 6. That's going to be almost impossible to overcome. I mean, seriously, that's like an army not far from the size of France's. That's a significant difference between the 2 games. If it was like, I don't know, a third or something, or they had 1 or 2 strong armies in them each, it might make some sense. I'm not saying that this is actually all that ahistorical. It's just that, because, the Papal States would have had a hard time beating Florence in a straight fight. And the Papal States have 3 armies. Florence having 3 would kind of be fair. Having 6 isn't exactly reasonable, though. And it just makes the neutrals no longer something that you will be fighting over, but rather something that maybe by the end of the game you could have taken 1 or 2 off. And that kind of puts into question the whole French campaign into Italy. They did have to devote quite a bit to it, but they were largely successful until the Spaniards and others, like the papacy, started throwing their weight against them. If you can isolate Milan, which with 6 armies, again, that's about the strength of France. And unlike France, if you don't, with sieges, which is how you have to attack that, if you don't completely overcome it, it just grows back. Now, it's going to be pretty hard to get a siege attack, I assume, on, say, the 1-to-1 or 2-to-1, that's going to destroy the defender. You might, but it's just a ridiculous roll. And I get the feeling that actually a lot of the advanced game rules like the idea that, you got to pay your whole income. Like that received enough play testing and enough feedback. what was a pretty light and ahistorical game, and it's still light, but at least it was kind of fast-paced and everything. It looks like it. Not that I played it, but it was so free and open that it would be fairly fast-paced comparatively, although with all the record-keeping, I don't know. Has turned into something where nobody can do a damn thing. Jump in on the economics, and then we'll load this up. And I'm not sure. I'll give it some more try, but the economics of the era was not a matter of let's gather up enough cash that we can conduct some operations. It generally was, yeah, let's put aside some money. No problem with some, but you certainly didn't put aside your entire, operating revenue into your treasury. There's some abstraction that may be at play here, but okay. Generally, countries could fight and raise capital in order to fight. They could find ways. They could squeeze the peasants. They could, they could seek out loans. They could hawk valuable possessions. There were ways of raising money continuously when it was so important that you had to have a war. Now, there were certainly times when it wasn't, but those usually came as kind of a shock to the government. Tried to squeeze the peasants and it didn't work. The fact that this game requires you to pay your entirety of your income to basically pursue the war at all, and then an additional cost on top of the entirety of your income, and that you have the cash here, and that you can calculate how well you'll do, and that you can stockpile as much cash as you want, is going to lead to a highly, highly ahistorical behavior in the game, which is, you want to fight a war? You just stockpile your cash until you have huge excesses and then use it. A different mechanism needs to be put in place. This game does not it doesn't promote the kind of activity that historically happened because the economic system is too abstracted and too much of a, you collect cash and then you can spend it for things. And the particulars of the spending are so extreme. And I'm not saying they shouldn't be that extreme. I actually believe, that it's reasonable that the countries would have a hard time maintaining the war. There's reasons why there were long periods where not a lot of engagement happened, and they were largely financial. But they weren't of the case of, it wasn't a matter of, let's just collect up enough money that we can go to war for 10 years, which is what this game is turning into. And it's totally unreasonable. So the advanced game needs a different economic system. The basic game is going to be too active, but probably fun enough that it that it's not terrible. It's a real pity, though, that neither this version nor the original version provided you with enough play aids to actually play the game, that you have to go out of your way and make a lot of material for this game. Look, it's one thing to keep track of your treasury, to keep track of your income in your treasury. You're starting to get to the edge here, though. This is what Imperium Romanum 2 had. Now, on this one, though, you have to keep track of the ownership of all the territories. You have to keep track, and there are a lot of little territories. You have to keep track of the religious status of all the territories, and there just are not components to do any of this. A couple of things could have helped, Had they made charts to track them, fine. Had they made counters to put on at least a lot of the space on the map, fine. And I can get around it, but you expect a game to come with the components that would help you play it, right? All right, let's send this up since I've used my hour. And I don't know how, I mean, I have this feeling I'm just going to be playing like half the game I'm going to be collecting up income, and then the other half we're going to go bonsai out everything. And that is completely ahistorical too, just as much as everybody operating, all the time would be.